Hello, hello, and welcome to the Smoko podcast. My name is Alexis Armstrong, your host. Nice to meet you. The Smoko podcast is the place to celebrate and highlight women, trans women, and non binary folk working within STEM and trade occupations. So please tune in, take a break, and join us. We are on Smoko. And today we are extremely lucky to be joined by the lovely Ritu Jhaveri, who is a pioneer within the STEM education space. And she's an educator with over 12 years of experience, and she has then switched from pure educator to entrepreneur. And she is the CEO and co founder of a wonderful organization called Deschool Online Inc., which we're going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to bury the lead. We're going to talk all about Deschool and what it does. But Ritu is just an amazing woman who's doing fantastic things for STEM education. And I can't wait to talk all things education, STEM, accessibility, the whole bit. Ritu, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely, Alexis. And I just want to say it's a pleasure being here. And I've seen Smoko podcast, and all the incredible people you speak to. And I absolutely love what Smoko is doing, just in the field of STEM, especially women in STEM. So kudos to you. And I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. And I'm so excited to talk about this because we've talked a little bit before, and it's just like an honor meeting you. When you reached out, I was like, I went into a deep dive about what D School was because I didn't know what this program was. And maybe that's where we can start because you have this breadth of experience that you've worked all over the world. You have 12 years of experience working in education. And then you went from education to entrepreneur. And I was wondering if we could start with D School, kind of the mission of the company and the story behind how D School originated and how did you make that transition?
Absolutely. So, D School is an organization founded solely by women. We're women led, we're women founded, or we are locally based in Toronto. We're less than a year old in operation, to be honest. Of course, the back work started more than a year ago, but we are a STEM learning organization. D School was founded because of one sole reason. I've been an educator, and so has all the women in my founding team. We bring real life STEM experts to the classroom. So we work with schools. So we connect students, school students, like right from grade 1 to grade 12, to real STEM experts. Think scientists, engineers, architects. Our programs are co-created not just by us, who are the experts in curriculum, but by these experts. And we really felt that there was a gap between what's happening in school classrooms and school curriculums on a regular basis, not just in Canada, overseas as well, as to what students eventually need when they graduate college, when they go out to get a job. Those skills are very different. I've spoken to so many youngsters straight out of school in Canada, overseas, and they don't feel ready. So what we do is we create these short programs at these schools across different fields in STEM, where we take these experts into classrooms, make the students meet them, there's interaction, there are activities, so that children and students actually know as to what these professions are, what's the future requirement, how do you prepare yourself to excel in those fields. So that's our mission. That's how we started.
I love the program. I love the fact that the founding is based on your real world experience of being seeing it as an educator to be like, okay, there's a gap here and we're not providing the right opportunities for our students and maybe our heart's in the right place, but we're really not setting them up for the future. And I like this
Yes.
long-term approach that you guys have with education because we're talking early education. We're talking about like elementary school, and you're
Yes.
having this mindset of being like, okay, when they're 18, when they're 20, how do we set them up now? And I think
Yes.
that was something that I had never seen in terms of education. And I think it's a real strength of D School. Like you have a bunch of strengths, but I think that is one is this long-term mindset about science
Yes.
education.
Absolutely, and I think if when you look at our website, and we're very fresh, we only launched a few months ago, and when we approach schools, we still have to explain to them what we're doing because they haven't seen this. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, wow! So you actually bring these scientists to the classroom? Why?" And then Rebecca, Sakshi, the founding team, we try and explain to them that we've been in the classroom, we have seen the disconnect, and every school principal and teacher we've spoken to in Ontario, they completely agree. So we're very happy from a business point of view. There is a product market fit over here. because
Mhm.
that's sometimes most companies get wrong. And we work very hard on researching, speaking to teachers. I know we, all of us are educators, but
Mhm.
we still had a doubt that, okay, we feel this, which is three of us. What about the rest? So we
Yeah.
spoke to so many teachers and they're like, yeah, like it's just, I'll give you an example. One of our programs for the young ones, the young children, is about meeting urban farmers,
Mm.
understanding the quality of soil, because that eventually decides how good and healthy your food is. So when we bring them into the classrooms, the students are like, oh, that's where our food comes from. Because children
Mm.
nowadays, they just go to the supermarket. They don't know the entire cycle. So we talk about food nutrients and all of that. At the same time, we're connecting this to agri-tech, how agri-tech is changing, like, the
Mhm.
involvement of robotic arms, and that's where the new fields are, that's where the professions lie. So schools are doing a good job, but it's too much for them.
Mhm.
All this, in moving at such a fast pace, it's just too much for any school board. So we're not blaming them, we're just here to help them.
Oh, totally, completely. You're here to, like, I think teachers are strapped. I think everybody realizes that teachers were strapped before COVID. I think after COVID, people realize the length of stretch that our education system is in and educators are in. And you're coming in as this extra added STEM education system. And I think you said a couple really cool things in that answer. The first one was trusting your gut. And like, yes, it's your lived experience, but having that like kind of normal knee-jerk reaction to be like, well, is my lived experience actually valid and is it across
Yeah,
the board? And like how beautiful that is that all of a sudden you have all these teachers being like, no, I agree with you and this is something that we need. But I
yeah,
also love that you're humanizing science really young and you're bringing in a real world example that they can actually access. Like they know that they have to eat food, they know that they go to the supermarket and get their food, but then to have a science perspective on top of that,
yes,
I think is something that is kind of lacking in society, not even just education. I think that sometimes we have a lack of the science behind maybe some of our resources or what happens in our day-to-day life. So I think that's really beautiful. And I think it maybe goes into your mission statement. And I was wondering if we could kind of talk a little bit about that because your mission statement is unlearning conventional schooling. And I was wondering, could you kind of explain what conventional schooling means and then the structure of non traditional education? What would that look like?
absolutely. Very happy to go into that. But before that, I'd like to talk a little bit about my
Hmm.
origin story, because
Okay.
this is, I really feel, my parents and I feel this was meant to be. So I was
Mm.
not supposed to be an educator. So I grew up in Mumbai, in India, and I was studying to be a finance professional. I was in university, and it so happened that I got a summer gig to teach at a school because someone was on maternity leave.
Mm.
And being a final year student in finance and focusing on international business, I suddenly realized I enjoy teaching more. And
Mm.
it's a horror for Indian parents when a kid comes back home and tells them that, hey, I want to take up
Hey.
teaching. And my parents were very nice and they were like, okay, so you're serious about this. So the first time you sound passionate about something. So they helped
Mm.
me open a small business when I was 20 years old. So I
Oh.
opened the business from my dad's home, my family home, and we went from school to school providing enrichment classes. So my job was to run the business because I'm a
Mm.
finance student. I hired
Mhm.
teachers and I gave them to schools. While I did that for 2 years, along with studying, I realized that I like teaching.
Mm.
And we made a great deal of profit. But at the end of my graduation, when I was about to start working with a financial firm in Mumbai, I told my parents, I've gotten the job, but I don't like it. Can you
Mhm.
give me 2 more years to study education? And that was literally the beginning. I moved to Singapore to study education. And I think 8 to 9 years of the time from then, I've worked as a teacher, as a curriculum specialist, moved on to be a principal, both in Singapore and Dubai. And I
Mhm.
think that's when it started coming back to me that I want to do a business, but it has to be in education. And that's when the thought of these schools started. Because having lived in these places, and I've realized that no matter how technological advanced we are, access
Mhm.
is still a problem. So these
Mm.
school was started because I wanted to have a platform, and this is a long-term goal. We are not there yet. We're
Yeah.
completely not there yet. But the long-term goal is to make this a borderless platform. And I don't want it to be limited by geography. And
Mhm.
that's the reason these school came about. And then we started looking at, okay, so these school is great, borderless learning is great. what subject are we looking at? And that's when STEM came in, because over the years I'd grown really fond of STEM, working in these different schools. And then we realized that let's go the unconventional way. By unconventional, I mean when we go to classrooms, when we're teaching, or when we were students, teaching is pretty unidirectional. It's very set. The curriculum is set. By unconventional, we mean is teaching the students the other way around, by making them realize, why are you learning something? You're learning about physics, you're learning chemistry. What's the why behind it? We want to give children the aha moments. For example, we have a renewable energy expert who's an expert at solar energy, wind, hydro, all of that. We're teaching them in our workshops to our expert that, hey, we're doing XYZ because we're running out of typical energy sources. We're running out of fossil fuel. So I think that's the unconventional twist to Deschool.
I love that. I love that structure of it, of kind of explaining how Deschool could look in terms of being a non-traditional structure that can be this borderless kind of accessible thing that all students can have access to, and it's not going to be limited by geographic region or maybe by school district or board. But then I love your personal story. And what amazing parents. I think that's a beautiful thing of it, of that support system. But I love that kind of beautiful system that I feel like this was fated. Like you were meant to make Deschool and you were meant to go into education and maybe on a little bit of a winding path. When you look at kind of this new model that you guys are doing, and I know you guys are very new and having those aha moments and really
Right.
teaching them the why behind it. Is that
Yes.
something that you see right away? What is the impact in terms of a student life? Like, do you just instantly see that they identify as a little mini scientist, or do you see that they're more curious? Like, what is kind of the next step after that first aha moment?
I think before even the students come in, it's the teachers
Mhm.
and the
Mm.
principals. They're like, what are you doing? And when they look at the kind of options we have, they're like, okay, let's talk about all of them. So when we go to the classrooms and we're still running pilots, the first thing that comes up is, and these are children, right? These are students,
Mhm.
end of the day, be it high school students. They're very curious. They're very excited to see these scientists, engineers come into classroom, because we want to tell them that they are as human as you and I
Mhm.
are. And again, even all our experts, we have about 14 right now, 12 on the website, they all have amazing stories. And
Mhm.
Alexis, it's incredible that they're so excited to deal with the students. And
Mhm.
everyone has a one common message that we just want to tell students and children that this is doable. You don't have
Mhm.
to be a genius to get into
Yeah.
these fields. You can make so much impact. So it begins with curiosity with students. I lead most of the sessions, like between the students and the experts, and we ask questions. And how did you become this? What did you study? So we kind of
Mhm.
break all those barriers, and then these are just conversations. So students are very
Ah.
curious, and then moving on to be excited, and then you can eventually see confidence building through the sessions. The biggest win for Deschool and the experts is informing the students about these choices that they have, irrespective of the province that they're from. That they have this choice, is just a matter of going ahead, making that decision.
Mhm. Ugh, you don't know how happy that answer and that impact makes me, just because one thing, this is my personal opinion, but one thing that I've thought for a long time, and I think it's a big failing in STEM, is I think that we have put these people and these professions on a pedestal. And I think that we've created this kind of lore behind people in STEM, that you have to be a certain way, you have to think a certain way, and that you have to be this super genius, kind of robotic, very analytical person. And I think if you talk to the people within STEM, that's not who they are. And I think that most people and most young people, I think they start off as natural scientists and engineers. And I think they start off as natural artists. And I think that slowly becomes kind of taken out of their identity by the school system of being like, well, if you're not good at math, then you're not a scientist. I was
Yes,
terrible at math. I wasn't good at science until I was in university because I had extreme learning disabilities and I was more creative and more artistic. It wasn't
yeah,
until I was in university that I met my first biology and geology professor that were like, no, you're amazing at science, because it's a field of creativity. That is what science is about.
exactly.
It is
And
about a
that changed
field.
everything. All of us from our generation can relate to that, irrespective of where we grew up. Because I remember growing up, I was academically doing pretty well. However, I wasn't very good at math as well. But I was very curious. So
Mhm.
whoever who knew me as a child knows what Deschool is doing. They're like, STEM? Ritu? I never thought. But
Yeah.
why not, right? Give the kid a chance. And that applies to all of us. And growing up, I remember that, again, I'm getting into gender
Yeah.
biases here, but you know where I'm
Mhm.
getting,
Yes,
right?
I
Like
do. Yeah. Yeah.
just to touch on the surface, it's like growing up as a girl child in that era, and it's not because it's India, just growing up as a girl child
As a girl.
anywhere in
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
90s.
Mhm.
And I was creative. I love singing and dancing. So it was
Mhm.
assumed that Ritu, even though she's curious, she's very excited about science, she's not going to go into science. And that's what
Yeah.
happened. And I still regret not taking science as a major because I didn't think about it, that my
Mhm.
environment wasn't conducive. So we don't want that to happen. We want
Yeah.
that to change. And it doesn't have to be a gender thing, right?
Mm-mm.
It just has to be your aptitude thing.
Totally. It has a aptitude, but it also has to be the structure of school and the structure of culture has to change. And that
It
mentality
does.
of being like, if you're curious and if you're creative, that's not meant for sciences. That is the essence of science. Like that is science
Exactly.
101.
Exactly.
So like it's more a culture change. And Ritu, I know one thing that's important to you guys is bridging the gap. And that's
Yes.
between like what's taught and then what's required afterwards. And again, that like long term when they're 20 years old, 21 years old,
Yes.
what is the knowledge base that they need? Could you kind of explain, in your opinion, what you think these main gaps are? And then what are we getting wrong in terms of STEM education? Like, how are these gaps existing and how are they being so pervasive within the education system?
Absolutely. So the gap exists because what we're teaching students in schools right now comes from a set of curriculum. Curriculum is set by educators, and it takes a long time to build a curriculum for a province or for a country. And it's humanly not possible to keep updating it at the speed at which our technology and science are developing. What we're teaching students in the classrooms, let's say for 4 years, and when they graduate, they're graduating every year, a new set of students. And
Hmm.
when they go out there to work and technology is changing at a fast pace, then there's a skill gap. And this became like a holy grail to address this problem. And that's how all our products came about, is because we read this research by Corn Ferry about future of work. And it talks about the global talent crunch. And one statement that stuck to all of us very, very closely was by the year 2030, about
Hmm.
85 million jobs in STEM are going to go unfilled. And that's not because we don't have enough people. We do have enough people. They're just not trained. They're not skilled in that way to take up those jobs. And that's going to cost us nothing less than $8.5 trillion in revenue. And that's a
Oh
big
my
number.
goodness. Yeah.
And when we look at the government, the reason they're supporting STEM so much and technology so much
Hmm.
is because of this. They know this as well. And I
Hmm.
really feel that it's a combined effort to close this gap, because there's no way big organizations like school boards or schools can keep closing this on a regular basis. And that's global.
Mm-mm.
That's why you see the rising number of a lot of organizations online which provide micro credentials, like, smaller credentials, not those typical traditional degrees. And even that is getting the students good jobs.
That is absolutely insane, that fact from your research. Like, that's probably gonna stay with me for a very long time as well, and I can't believe that that's the state by 2030, like, that is not that much time, and
Just
I know
7
you
years
touched
from
on.
now.
Yeah, like, that's really not a
Yeah.
huge amount of time. I think that you touched on something really, really correct in the way that I don't think any government is ever known to be fast or any school system is ever known to be really, flexible and accessible to change just because they have so much red tape and they have so many, like, government structures to go through that it is gonna take time for you guys when you're doing these upskilling courses and you're trying to keep up with technology,
Mhm.
what are the main sectors that you guys are looking at? Are you looking at pure technology? Is there some STEM sectors that are moving faster than others? Where are you guys really focused on?
Absolutely. I love this question, by the way, because we realized very late into operations that we actually have a niche. It was only when someone
Mhm.
pointed it out. So when we started off, we were just looking for the latest STEM trends, and industry agnostic. It could be anything. We started with drone technology. Then we slowly got into sustainability. Eventually, we realized it's just that we're heart educators. We're business women,
Mhm.
but I think we're educators at heart. So what has happened is, if you look at all our programs, they're into different industries in STEM, right? From agri-tech to data analysis to drones to farming, all of that. And more will be added, energy especially. However, all our programs have an anchor in sustainability. If the technology, if the science is doing human beings any good or our planet any good, we will support it. Having said that, I know all science does help human beings and the planet in some way, but we have a more sustainable angle to this. So if you pick any of our shops, even the ones with indigenous communities, we're trying to launch 2 of them with indigenous science experts, and we're so excited about that one. It all ties down to sustainability of our planet. Like one of our workshops with an indigenous expert is going to be, and he has been a forester for 20 years. So he's seen the foresting industry in Canada develop in the past 20 years, and he has his own perspective being a person from First Nation. So that is just so incredible for students to hear and listen to, not just about the industry, but also about climate change, about sustainability from his traditional knowledge. So we are very excited to bring all that to the students.
No, I think that's absolutely beautiful. I think what your program is doing is pretty incredible in closing these gaps, and kind of thank you for explaining where these gaps are coming from and maybe the structure of them and their origin, and what you guys are doing to help bridge those gaps. I know something that we both talked about and we've both bonded on over is increasing the representation of women in STEM. And this next question, it's not a gotcha question. When I wrote it out, like, I realized it could be taken like that, but it's more just a general curiosity, because increasing representation is something that's so big. And like, how do you tackle a problem like that? What are you guys doing in terms of structure and process at Deschool to increase representation of women in STEM? Like, how are you even tackling that problem?
I love this question, by the way. It's my favorite question. So it's not a gotcha question. I love it. As you know, we're a women founded organization. 2 of us are of color. When we started off, we were like, oh, yeah, let's do this, all of that. However, when we started collaborating with our STEM experts, only after a couple of months, we realized that, hey, they're all men. Everyone we've gotten on board they're all men, and we were like, what is wrong with us? So we consciously started looking for and collaborating with female STEM experts in Canada, across the world. And I always tell this to myself, like, you know what Rumi said, what you seek is seeking you. And when we started that journey, we just had so much love, so much energy come back to us from these STEM experts. We have 12 STEM programs, and 8 of which are being led by females right now. And when you look at our website too, it's very obvious. So we're just onboarding female STEM experts. Having said that, we love our male STEM experts. They're amazing. They're big cheerleaders as well. But we have to practice what we preach.
Oh, totally. We have to practice what we preach, but I also think that, like, we have to look at it in terms of an equity mindset instead of equality. We all know the stats that women, and also women of color, are minorities within these industries. And unfortunately, they're not being represented in terms of what we think about a scientist, what we think about an engineer. They're not if you look at leaders, if you look at actually in industry, we have these segments of the population which are not being adequately kind of shown or have the same stats. In university, I think we're starting to see a lot of change, but I don't think that we're seeing change in terms of industry or leadership. So I think that's so beautiful that you're having young kids and people in high school meeting scientists and realizing that they look a lot like them, or they look like their sister or their friend. Like, it just, I think it's a very, very powerful thing.
And I think it's about representation, right? What you just said. We're trying to represent different varieties of human beings in STEM careers. And I think that's what's changing. We also have a series that says Women in STEM. So we actually handpick a few experts from Deschool, and we run it in schools, especially girls' schools, to show them that, hey, look, all these scientists, and they're doing great work across the world. They're all females.
No, I think it's so important. And I think it's something that's within our power too. Like, I think that it's a huge problem, and sometimes it seems too big for one person or one organization, but that's something that we can adequately change, and, like, you can probably have some impact right away. Like, is there anything that you've seen of, like, young women in the program seeing a female scientist or engineer? Have you seen that impact in real life? I'm sure you have.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's what was missing in my childhood. Although I grew up in a very loving family and environment, but I didn't have enough female role models in science around me. Sure, there was that one of person who was a doctor, but we're really inundating the students and children around us with these role models. And you do see those changes in conversation. The first change we and the teachers notice is in conversations, the way they
Mm,
speak to each other, the way they speak about these professions. It's not unattainable anymore. It is
mm.
very much attainable. And I think that's a big win for us.
Mm. I think that would probably be your biggest win, honestly. Like, I feel like that's the magic of D School is the accessibility of it and changing the idea of scientists and engineers and bringing it to more people. And I know that that's one goal of D School is accessibility. And I know that's something that you guys are working on right now is moving towards the public sector because I think you've been largely within the private sector.
Yes.
And I know that this is something that I feel passionate about, that this is a problem in science and engineering is lack of accessibility. And I think right now we're having this push that people from maybe a privileged background has higher access to science than public systems. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to this gap of accessibility and impact in terms of science as an industry. Like, because we have this inaccessibility, where do you think we're going to go? And like, what is the consequence of that? Like, why is it so important for you guys to go into public school systems?
Yeah. Now it's a catch 22 situation in
Mm,
this case. So, as educators, we want to go to the public schooling system. But what's limiting us and why did we start with the private schooling system? It's access from their side. Private schools
mhm,
are very willing to take us on. The whole process is much shorter, and we can go in there and do what we're meant to do, speak to students, make the impact, and make a change. We're still in the I don't want to call it red tape, but the process, which is so
mhm,
long with different public school boards, and we've entered the game. We're waiting it out. However, the dream is to take this to the public school board because that's where it needs it the most. As I said earlier, to me, education changes your life. To me, it's
mhm,
your way to success. And logically, who needs it more? Students in the public schooling system, right? So
mhm,
that's our objective. To be honest, it's also the lack of funds, because there also have been conversations that we actually have to fund these workshops ourselves, which means public
mm,
school can't really pay for these workshops, which means we have to fund it ourselves. If we had access to those funds, we'd do it. We're
mhm.
actually looking for ways to raise funding to provide, to
Yourself.
make these workshops free for public school
Yeah.
boards till the time we get a clear entry into them. So accessibility is a big problem. It is a work in progress, I'd say. I
Mhm,
don't think that it's impossible to solve, but it will take a while.
mhm,
And I think it's a community effort, right? A few of us do want to make the change, want to make things more accessible. And Alexis, in a dream world, here's what accessibility means to me.
mhm,
So I've worked and traveled a lot in Southeast Asia because of work and just pleasure. And I've been very lucky to work with children, orphanages, schools in those areas. And that's when I realized how important accessibility is. But guess
mhm,
what? All they require is one laptop and an internet connection, and the
mm.
whole world can be theirs. But we are still far away to reach that level of accessibility. The day I can put a laptop, in a slum in Mumbai,
Yeah.
my dream has come true. And I know people are already doing it there,
Yeah.
but it's not just done enough. So yeah,
Mhm.
little by little, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, no, I know you will, and I know it's such a huge problem, and I love that dream because I support it and I agree with it. Like, that would be a dream of mine as well, of just increasing accessibility of science education, I think is so important. One thing that you touched on there is that it will be a community effort.
Yes.
Is there anything that the community can do to support you? Like, how can we help support Deschool to bring you guys to the public system? Because I understand that it is a fund game and it
Yeah,
is also maybe a governance or a red tape game as well, that it is going to be a
yeah.
little bit slow. But is there anything that we can do as a community to help you now?
A great question, because I'm constantly talking to teachers from the public school system who are also parents. I think if
Mm,
the boards hear enough from parents and teachers about the work that we're doing, and just to give us a try to see the impact that we can make, it'll change a lot. Because we're even okay to do some complimentary sessions just to give them a taste of what change can look like and how much work we can take from them, we can take off their
mhm.
back, so that they can focus on what schools usually focus, because schools are really busy places to run, and they are
Yeah.
very, very busy. They don't have time to, like, go deep dive into all of this. So I think outsourcing these tasks to organizations like Deschool would be easier on them. And
Mhm.
we all know that they all have the funds. It's just a matter of allocating those funds to the right places. So yes, I
Mhm.
think hearing from parents and teachers is great help, and that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to
Okay.
create that awareness.
Mm. Just advocating for the school and trying to get more like word of mouth and from the students
Yes.
and from their parents. Yeah. Maybe to bring us to a general public, in terms of helping you guys, is there also maybe something that we need to relearn? Is there any misconceptions the public may have about education, about Deschool, about these types of programs? And then what's something of importance that you think the public should really better understand?
I'll take this question slightly differently. More
Okay.
than misconception, I feel there's a lack of information in this field,
Mm.
and that stems from the speed at which the field of STEM is growing. As I said, that when we go to schools, we actually have to take about 8 to 10 minutes to explain to them, to these really educated head of schools, about what we exactly do. It's just
Mhm.
lack of information out there. And I just feel that the speed at which we've made progress in technology, inventions, advancements, and at the same speed with which all the STEM jobs have grown, we can't even imagine that. And I think, the truth be told, when we started Deschool, in spite of being educators, we knew very little about these fields. So the more we educated ourselves and created these programs, what we realized is information is key over here.
Mhm.
So that's what we do through our social media, through our website, through when we go to schools. We just inform students about it, because we may be talking about, let's say, agri-tech, but we also want them to know that there are several other fields that are coming up, which are way different from the conventional STEM fields of, being a doctor or engineer
Mhm.
or architect. There are so many niches right now.
Mm.
So I would really love to see everyone around us just educating themselves about how
Mm.
fast STEM is moving.
Mm. I feel like that's a can of worms in itself, but like I love that redirect of the question of like the misconception of it is just the speed of information and the amount of information and the amount of change that is maybe happening in general. It almost kind of sounds like the public in general needs to redefine what science is and what are the roles of scientists and what does that actually look like in terms of niche. Like it seems like it's moving so fast that almost you guys have to like every single day
Yes.
reassess to be like, okay, what's our next
Absolutely.
move? I know that we're at time, so I just want to maybe wrap it up. But the last one that I would like to talk about is I think this has been a lovely conversation and for the most part, super, super positive. But this space can be big, it can be heavy, it can be kind of a little bit daunting. Is there anything right now in education and STEM education that gives you joy and kind of hope for this space? This could be a person, your students, your company. It could be teachers that you're talking about, maybe a trend, anything that's really giving you joy, hope, and being like, okay, you know what? This is going to work. This is okay.
Wow, this is such a deep question, right? um, I just want to say that I think I'm very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing right now with Deschool, and I know we have a long way to go, but we're actually working on two things that gives me the biggest joy. Like I
Mm,
can't tell you how much joy and hope and positivity these two things give me. And fortunately, through Deschool, I'm working on both of them with my team.
mm,
Number one, that's more short term, would be to see more girls and more women take up STEM careers. And I know how much both of us, are passionate about this. And you're doing Smoko, and it's an incredible platform to showcase these women. How I know it's happening. And when I was talking to a friend back in Cambodia, and she's like, "Yeah, Ritu, it's not that bad. It's happening." I'm like, "I know, but
Mhm.
the selfish me wants to see it happen faster. I want to see this becoming a trend, and
Mm.
I want like every girl who I speak to speak a different language, and know it, take it for given that a career in STEM is easy and it's reachable. I want them to aspire for it. So
Mm.
that's something makes me happier the more I see it. My
Mhm.
number two is a big one. I don't think I'll see it happen in my lifetime. At least if I see it happen, it'll be a miracle. And it's around access. It's around
Mm.
access to high quality education. And I saw this very, very closely in my travels and in my time growing up, in my 20s especially. When you grow up in a certain environment, you don't actually see the pros and cons until you walk away
Mhm.
from it. So when I was growing up in India, everything was comfortable. But in my 20s, I traveled and I volunteered a lot in schools in different countries in Southeast Asia. And every time I came back to Singapore, which is a privileged country and people
Yeah.
are very comfortable there, that's when I realized. And I used to talk about access with my ex-boss and my mentor. And we spoke about that access to quality education is so rare in many
Mhm.
countries around us, and it has to change. And how can
Mm.
it change? We can use technology to change that. So that too was a big reason for me to start Deschool. And I think when I see children in rural areas just struggling for that access, changing that will make me really happy.
Yeah. Oh, those are two amazing answers. And you're doing both of those things, like both of those things that bring you joy and that your hope of this industry of being like, okay, where are we going to go? I love that those are the two pillars of D School. One is female representation. I mean, look at your guys' staff, look at your founding team. Like, you guys are living examples of increasing that representation. And then I love the accessibility function as well. And I think something that's come across within this interview is the importance of technology. I feel like that's going back to your curriculum. It's all tech focused and it's really future focused. But I also think it's really community focused. And I think that's a big piece of accessibility. And I think what stuck me from the moment that I first discovered D School to now is just how you guys are tackling the accessibility problem by asking local experts within the community to come and help out. And I think that
Yes.
that's a magical ingredient, is really talking to the community and bringing the community in to talk to these students. Ritu, thank you for this lovely conversation. It was so wonderful meeting you and talking about STEM education and youth engagement. And I just can't wait to see the future of D School and where do you guys go. This is an incredible program.
Thank you very much, Alexis. A pleasure is all mine. I've been looking forward to having this chat with you, and I hope that I was able to share some thoughts and some answers. And yep, equally excited to see where the school is heading.
Yeah. No, oh my goodness. It's an honor speaking with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for everybody listening, this is the Smoko podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back with a new episode next Wednesday. See you later.